Okay, nobody complained about being bored of surveys. So who hasn't heard of Yelp? Excellent. This works really well in New York and San Francisco. It works less well in like Europe. I work for Yelp in Europe. I'm based in London. And yeah, the whole spiel follows up. You all know who Yelp is. You know, we're that company that produces blogs. And we occasionally spit out restaurant reviews on the side, or at least working as an SRE, that kind of, to me, feels like what our core thing does. Our core application produces terabytes and terabytes of blogs with occasional restaurant reviews. That's what Yelp does. So I don't know, I work in the SRE team in Yelp, and I work on automating producing billions of blogs really fast. And so I'm a lot of people actually have covered a lot of the same topics as me about things that you might want to know, things you might want to look at. I'm going to try and cover the why about that. Not so much the specific tools and specific technologies, because actually I'm going to try and not be prescriptive. I mean, normally I kind of stand at the front of these things and go, you guys are doing it wrong. You folks, but I'm not going to do that today, other than one or two places. So anyway, let's start about why is this an important topic? Why do I care? Why am I talking about this? Why would you invest in your workflow? Well, why would you invest in anything? Well, hopefully, if it's your workflow, it's going to leave you with more time, to do. Well, all you folks have your own lives and make your own choices, and it's up to you to, decide what's important. And no, I mean, whatever, spending time in your workflow, which is how you develop your public code, how you look after your public code, you're going to be doing it all day, every day, or half the day, every day. So it's worth investing in. It really is worth investing in, because it's all about working smarter. Who likes doing 12-hour days of stupid stuff? Right, you do. So I think you may be at the wrong meetup. But I mean, I don't mind working 12-hour days. In fact, I regularly do it on my own time for open source because it's fun. But you ask me to do the same thing more than 3 times repeatedly, I'm going to quit pretty fast. That's how it works. So optimizing this is worthwhile. I mean, it doesn't really matter whether that gives you more time to go and spend time with your family, go and drink beer, or go and play Dwarf Fortress, or maybe it just lets you write less bugs because you're able to develop things faster, and therefore you get more time to find those bugs. Because there's some statistic that I'm just going to throw out there that 1 in every 3 lines of code contains at least 1 bug as you write it. So this is kind of important, right? It's kind of important to me, at least, to not go completely crazy. So this is where I'm going to be prescriptive. If you're not using revision control, sorry, you're doing it wrong. You must have your stuff in revision control. Hopefully everybody is sold. Does anybody feel like they need selling on that? Or am I talking crazy talk? Right, I'm not seeing any hands up, and that's good, because I don't know how to sell that other than coming and kind of slapping people. So I recommend Git, just because this is what everybody does, and there's a bunch of amazing tools around it. Specifically, I'm going to pick out GitLite. This is amazing. I've got a load of links again, so there'll be a link to that. If you have to, I'm not going to tell you you're doing it wrong, just you're not doing it best. Right, so common baseline, all got our code in revision control. I think everybody knows that that's a done deal at this point. So cool, I've got some public code that's going to do something to some machines. Maybe. Well, next, how do you actually run Puppet? Personally, and this is a personal preference, I like running Puppet from Chrome. Because back in the olden days, about 4 years ago, the Puppet agent had a bad habit of leaking memory. And very, very easy to lose and very hard to regain. So I like running Puppet from Cron because I was making fun 4 years ago. Doesn't really matter. Okay, so running Puppet itself, there's two possible approaches here. One of which is that you can always run it in no-op mode, and you have to manually log into machines and actually apply your changes, which is great because it means that if you commit something that is really stupid, that say deletes a patch from all your web servers, well, that's okay because you're not actually running Puppet for real. The other mode would be automatic apply, where you do actually run Puppet for real on your web servers. It's a pretty old quote, I think, everybody should have seen this already. I'm going to go out there and be crazy and say, actually, I think you should automatically apply Puppet. Yes, this is scary. If you commit code and push it to master that is going to turn off Apache on all your web servers, you're going to have a bad time. Don't do that. And there's a whole bunch of things that you can do to stop you doing that, and that's kind of what I'm calling workflow for the purpose of this talk. So the simplest one is, well, go and manually disable Puppet on all your web servers before pushing a scary change, and then rename it on every web server. And as long as you're monitoring, like you get a Nagios or sensor alert if a machine has been disabled for more than 8 hours, then that's fine. You could also go completely crazy and have a testing workflow. I know that is kind of alien to a lot of traditional sysadmins, that you could kind of test things. But the key point, the key reason that I'm recommending automatic apply is eventual consistency. I.e., your servers will be in the configuration that you specified sooner or later, rather sooner if you're running Puppet every half hour, every hour. And that gives you a load of advantages, or it's kind of scary, but the disadvantages are even scarier. Because, well, everybody's heard the kind of Facebook mantra, right? Move fast and break things. And it's obviously a trite trivialism. What they actually mean is move just fast enough to be able to be cutting edge, and you should be slightly scared all the time, because well, the feeling you've got is called business agility. It's not fear, it's business agility, it's called killing your competitors. Actually, you should always be a little scared, but well, you can test things, This is not hard. If you're in Git, you can branch for every significant change, and you can reduce batch size. You can make really, really, really small changes. You can actually do works that your small changes are easy to test. And because you're doing small changes, they're inherently easier to test. And they're much easier to roll back if you're doing really, really small changes. Going and working on something for 3 months and then dropping it to the master that completely changes the way you reconfigure all of your web servers is never going to work well for you if you want to drop 3 months worth of work. You're going to have, no matter if you're automatically applying or not, you're going to have a bad time if you try applying 3 months worth of work at once, right? I mean, who's had the experience of shipping some software that you haven't done a release of for more than 6 months that's gone horribly wrong? Mostly because you haven't released it for more than 6 months, right? Okay, me and him, definitely. I think the rest of you just aren't admitting to that. Because, otherwise what you end up with is, well, there's a production issue, I need to make Puppet change something, and therefore I have to apply the last 6 months worth of changes to this machine that hasn't had any changes, so we run in no-op mode by default. And actually that's really even scarier. Because if you don't apply all of your changes that are in master by default, you end up in a place where you're like, well, there's some changes. They changed things. That's a thing. Personally, I like to be, that's a change that I expected. It changed the things that I expected. I can now go and test it. If you batch up 3 months worth of changes because you're running in no-op mode, you end up in this, well, some stuff changed, that's... And things being broken, even things being broken all the time, is mostly okay, or it can be mostly okay if we do this crazy thing we hate doing because, we're all technical people and we're all really bad at it, but, if you just talk to each other, and you're like, I'm going to be changing all the code that manages Apache, please, everybody, throw bricks at me if you see any breakage. And then you can do small changes, some of which will break some things. And most of this is a social problem. Most of this is a social problem, and restricting change is a technical fix to a social problem, and technical fixes to social problems work really well. We all know that. See the law system anywhere. Well, what does law seek to do other than technical fixes to social problems? Yeah, and we make more laws every year, because that's going to work well. More complexity doesn't make more loophole. Quite. Okay, so hopefully I've convinced you all. And if not, that's fine. That's fine. You're just going to need to develop some more tooling so that you can manage the sanity of running not mode. You can know how far your servers are away. That's a reasonable choice as long as you're prepared to invest in that choice and less scary stuff. So some of the tools that you might need and want to use. It's pretty easy to actually arrange your public code in a way such that standalone mode works. So you can run it from a master, and it's normally run from a master, but also you can just check your public code out on one machine and run something approximately like that. I literally lifted this out of the Yelp code base the other day. Another example, not mode. So we have a tool called Tools What Would Happen On. And the clue's kind of in the name. What it does is it takes your current checkout, rsyncs it across to another machine, it goes, SSHs to that machine, runs public in no-op mode, pulls all the results back, and so when you're developing something or testing something, you can just go, oh, what would happen on Web 15 if I was to deploy this now? What would happen on DB29 if I was to deploy? And so you can gain confidence whilst you're still developing your stuff. You can then push a branch into Git, preferably get a colleague to look it over, and so by the time that you actually merge it into master and it gets automatically applied to your other hundreds of web servers, then well, it can still go wrong, but you're relatively confident at that point. You've done your best effort, right? Everybody's going to screw up sooner or later. No matter how careful you are, you will make an outage. Happens. The other brilliant thing for testing is dynamic environments. Who's heard of this idea, or who's heard of bucket environments at all? Right, who has no idea what I mean when I say a bucket environment? Okay, there's enough people who have no idea what I'm talking about, but I'll kind of explain that. So what you can do, by default, the way that you'll simply set buckets up is that you check out your public code, probably the master branch, and it just runs that and applies on all your servers. What you can do instead is, if you push things into Git, and I'm going to assume all Git, but if you make a branch in Git and you push that branch up, you can get that branch checked out in the directory, and you can point to your public master, this folder full of directories, one of which has a special name, and that's the one things default to. But then you can use --environment, my test branch, my core feature, and put it on this alternate code that exists in your Git branch, which is awesome, because it means that you can do the same thing as what would happen on, but you can control what environment things are in from here on, so you can do it for an entire environment. You can do it, because it goes to your puppet masters, or perhaps on your puppet masters, you don't have the SSH firewall problems that you might have in my previous solution. Again, this is no one correct solution, this is just various ways that you can solve the being able to test my code before I merge it to master problem. I wrote, or I half wrote, a bunch of people I used to work with and a bunch of people I now work with because I joined my new company and stole it because it's open source. It's awesome. We wrote a tool called Puppet Update that is an M collective agent, and currently that deploys all the branches of our Puppet code across our 13, I can't remember, Puppet masters. You can alternatively use R10K or whatever you want. There's links to both of these things and how to use them at the end. These are two possible solutions. You can write something yourself to just copy your public code into a folder on your Puppet Master, and just creating that folder is an environment, and then you can use this to it. Okay. So, the astute among you may have noticed that I am actually suggesting that my first two serious suggestions of how to test your Puppet code kind of fall under this, which is totally reasonable, but, well, if you don't test your Puppet code at all, these things are a big step forwards, yeah? I mean, I've entered shops, mentioning no names, where you just kind of committed, and then you went to the machines you thought might be effective and ran it really quickly before Cron did, and then panicked if it looked wrong. Right. So this, yes, we are testing in production here. For a lot of people, I think this is quite a big step forwards. So I'm trolling, but really. So afterwards, after you deleted the Apache config from all your web servers, which is going to happen sooner or later, you kind of need to know what Puppet did where. You're likely to, or at least I'm likely to, because I'm swearing because I deleted all the Apache config. There's a whole reporting infrastructure in Puppet, which one of the people in my company, which one kind of talked about, so I'm not going to bang on about this. But Puppet has logging and reporting functionality. It's really easy, it's really pluggable. You can push your Puppet reports to whatever you like. And one of the things that I will link later is, it took me literally 2 hours to build a tiny Ruby class that pushes reports to whatever I chose, and another day to build my own front end for reading reports. I'm not recommending you do this. I'm just saying it's not a big deal. If you want to, getting custom reports into IRC or Slack or whatever, even if someone hasn't written it, it's probably going to be a couple of hours. And if you think about how useful getting those actual reports and connecting them, manual things together automatically is, it's completely worth it. Puppet also, I'm not sure you're aware, but by default, everybody uses Puppet, both on the agent and on the master, will save the compile catalog to disk. On the master specifically, you'll get multiple compile catalogs from the past, so it's quite easy to write a tool called what would happen on, which I do intend to open source, but I haven't got to yet. But you can literally go and inspect the catalogs for the last few days on this machine and work out what changed. Get the logs back, work out what files into /etc did Puppet change in the last 2 days and when. Again, writing something like this is probably going to take you less than a day. The benefit that you'll get, and I will try and open source files real soon, I haven't got there. The benefit you'll get from this is well worth the day's writing it. And yeah, reporting. So there's a whole bunch of things to do this already. There's Foreman is one of the popular open source things that does this. I wrote a thing called Norman because I'm terrible at puns. Puppet Enterprise, someone may have heard of that, has a report viewer. This is probably a terribly old screenshot. It probably looks much better right now. Reporting, it's right there. I've heard people complain it's really hard to know what Puppet did, and the answer is no, you just haven't bothered to automate knowing what Puppet did. That's stupid. Don't complain. But if you're not willing to put an hour into fixing it, you shouldn't complain about it. And most of these things are, you can work out that you can maybe not have it live across your entire property, but you can work out this is the thing that we're going to do in an hour or two's worth of play. And you have a conversation with your team. The productivity gains you can get from that should be a no-brainer. And if your organisation is in any way functional, then well, it's a no-brainer. Of course, we'll do that. If your organisation is in no way functional, then we're hiring. Cool. So this has already been mentioned. I won't stay on it for too long. But Puppet syntax. This is if you're not doing this, you should do this at some level. Because let's face it, nobody should ever be merging code that doesn't compile. At least not without lots and lots of nerf dots in their head. Because they merged lots of code that doesn't compile. Personally, I'd recommend just sticking that or something like that into your Git hooks so that you literally, public syntax is really fast. You can do a syntax check before you commit every time. And then you literally can't make a typo because you won't be able to commit that commit. Duh. And I'm that sort of person, you know, I will introduce syntax errors unless I automate myself to not be able to introduce syntax errors. I'm a terrible programmer, or at least I'm incredibly dyslexic, so I can't type. I literally can't see the syntax error until the error message into the line on time. Literally. This has also been covered. I kind of feel like I'm going over a chunk of the same ground again, but managing your Puppet modules. In the last 12, 18, 24 months, Puppet 4 has really taken off, and there are, and not every module on the Forge you can just pick up and reuse in your environment. There are a really good bunch of modules that you almost certainly can. I mean, the Nginx module, the Ncollective module, the Docker module, all of these things I have patched, but mostly you will be able to mostly use them unless you're doing crazy things. And even if you are doing crazy things, forking them and patching the 3 lines you need is going to be so much faster, cheaper, easier with less bugs than writing your own version. So, the way that I arrange this is we keep our internally written modules in a directory called modules, and we keep all the modules we're pulling from the Forge in a directory called vendor modules, and we get R10K to just delete and then replace the entire contents of the vendor modules directory. If you don't want to do that, and if you want all of your written modules, including your self-written ones, your organization to be in different Git repositories, people are kind of saying this is best practice, and I kind of agree, but it's also kind of heavyweight, especially if you're just starting out with Puppet, to keep every single one of your modules in a different Git repository. Do what you like, do what works for you and for your organization, but there's tools to help. It's worth investing in them. Yeah, like I said, a bunch of Forge models are useful, but well, a lot of companies, their legal departments got much better in the last few years. It is probably actually, well, about 18 months ago now, I basically had a conversation with Yelp Legal going, well, so I want to be able to fork 4 modules in a day and contribute 4 patches back in a day. And I'm in London and you're in San Francisco. You wake up at 5 p.m. my time. Well, I can't submit a form to legal without my workflow being terrible, right? I just can't do that. So after a bit of back and forth, we basically ended up with an agreed set of, well, so this is the Puppet code. But unless you're Puppet Labs, then this probably isn't the core part of your business. You know, if someone else has a great Nginx module, you can use that. And even if you add a few features that you need that aren't in the great Nginx module, your business is not going to really suffer if you give those things away. In fact, your business is likely to win if you give those things away, because you can give them away for free and then someone else has to look after them. Not you. It becomes someone else's module. And in 6 months' time, when you need some new features, well, somebody else on the internet will probably have written and contributed that. And if you contribute it back, you can just upgrade the module. If you have a bunch of custom patches you never sent to the author, well, maybe that'll work and maybe it won't. Or maybe you'll just have to spend the time again rewriting your custom patches. So again, this is a social problem, but talk to your lawyers, and if you're receptive, we're hiring. just saying. You know, I think this is kind of a minimum bar for sanity, actually. We should all be forking things on GitHub And sometimes you don't have the time, or sometimes you need to do a nasty hack and it doesn't go back upstream. Like, yeah, sure, that's reality, but, or maybe you want to be crazy, or your lawyers are crazy and you really like your job. Okay, sure, fork a Forge module into an internal Git repository, and then modify it. That's fine. You can still use R10K, and if you do Gitolite for your internal Git, like I was suggesting earlier, then that becomes really trivial. So the other objection I hear or have heard about using Forge modules and kind of pulling them in automatically or replacing them automatically with a tool like R10K, well, there's two complaints usually. One of which is it's slow, and the second of which is, oh, we need to hit the public Forge. Well, so don't. There are things on GitHub, like Gitolite will automatically mirror Git repositories. You can set it up so you can just git at your.git.server.your.company.com/mirrors/whatever. It will just translate that to GitHub and mirror and clone that thing. And you need to alter no config. You just clone from, just translate the GitHub URL into your URL. You automatically have a mirror. Bingo. And it's fast. And then you don't depend on GitHub being up. And all of those complaints go away. If you want to use, rather than Git actual Forge modules, there are a couple of projects. Again, there'll be links at the end. There's an entire slide link at the end. For these private forges, you can mirror Forge, but your own Forge internally. There's no excuse, basically, not to use Forge modules in a whole bunch of cases. If you are writing your own modules, which you'll end up doing, I've heard about Geppetto this morning. If you're doing this, if you're VR, Emacs, traditional folks, you don't like the pointy clicky so much, then you can use Puppet Module Generate. And the clue that a lot of people don't get is Puppet Module Generate will generate you a framework module that kind of works. You can replace a template in this. As you might have noticed from the slight accent, I'm British, and this is why I pay my taxes. No, literally, this is why I pay my taxes. GDS is Government Digital Services. The UK government publishes a best practice Puppet module skeleton with my tax dollars. And I imagine that 100% of my tax dollars go to GDS, and I'm fine paying my taxes. Just a personal thing. But yeah, no, you should totally check out their skeleton. Bunches of it might not work for you, but it's a really good place to you will see all the testing technologies in one module immediately. And you might not be using half of them, you might just want to delete half this skeleton. But it will show you all best practice features. Certainly start, if you're not using a custom skeleton already, you should start there. Okay? So, this is kind of quote-unquote real testing, by which I mean kind of something that isn't logging onto a production machine and running Puppet noob. I mean testing like computer scientists talk about testing. But I'm not going to be dogmatic here. Well, at least I'm trying to avoid being too dogmatic here. You should do what's right for you and your team and your organization. In some cases, if your team has lots of people who come from the development background, then they'll be like, yeah, unit tests, why are we not doing unit tests in Puppet? Of course you can. Sysadmin teams may be less enthusiastic about that, and that's fine. That's fine. You should be doing whatever provides value for your team and your organization, which is going to be some selection of things I'm talking about here, not all of them. If only because a bunch of the things I'm talking about are mutually exclusive, right? So whatever's good for your company, as long as you're the key point here is that you shouldn't be spending time and effort to make things better. You shouldn't put up with the tools out of the box. You should wrap them, you should write your own docs for how we use these tools. You should just make it easy for people. Make it easy to get feedback about what's happening. I'm a massive IRC fan, which again is probably because I'm from the 80s. But I really like this. I really like this. This is all green. It doesn't normally or that much look like that in our profits, but I didn't want to show you that everything is like, fail was broken by me. So we publish this kind of regularly whenever you go from a clean puppet run to an unclean puppet run, or vice versa. We publish a line into IRC. So you can look up, did anyone last night drop anything which broke puppet on an unexpected set of machines? Because, well, no, at least when you get to Yelp scale, you cannot test on every machine class, every machine type in every circumstance. Well, you can if you just 1 week, 1 change. That's not reasonable. Or at least it's not agile enough that one of our competitors won't kill it. You only make 1 change each a week because you won't spend half a day writing the change and 4.5 days testing it. No, not going to work so well. Because it's all about tightening your OODA loop. So who has no idea what an OODA loop is? Some people. Okay, so this is a military term which I'm going to screw up royally. So it's observe, orient, decide, act. And the idea is that you use the information, like your nice puppet run logs to work out what's broken at the moment. And then you observe, take in a bunch of information. Orient, kind of sort that, decide, like, someone broke all the puppet on Centaur 6 nodes. Whoops. Act, right, I'm going to go fix that. And the point about this OODA loop thing, it comes from military strategy. And the idea is if your OODA loop is shorter, you will almost always kill your opposition. The reason that guerrilla fighters in warfare is so effective is their OODA loop is really, really short. They can duck it from outside a tree, shoot someone, bugger off. If your reaction loop, if you can think of a new product and launch that new product, throw away that new product because it was a terrible idea, 5 times faster than your competitors, then if you have the same number of good ideas as them, you're going to deliver 5 times more good ideas per unit time, right? You're going to just loop your competitors because they're like, because maybe you both start working on the same thing. You launched it and decided it's a terrible idea, but both start working on the same thing in January. You and your competitor, you launched it in March. You decided it's a terrible idea in May. You've killed the project by June. You're going on to another project, and your competitor delivers in December, and 3 years on, they're out of business, right? That's what OODA loops are about. And they work in, well, it's a thing of business context and also technical context. If you can innovate faster, then you're going to kill your competitors. And this is, I think, actually this is why all of us are here, right? We're actually here because we realised that hand-crafted servers that take a month to set up are not the way forwards. I want to be able to build an Elasticsearch cluster, preferably on the bus from my phone. Because someone asked me about it on GChat, and I'm like, sure, have another 20 N3X larges. I just did it from my phone. That's a short OODA loop. And tomorrow, I don't need that. Fine, delete it. But it lets your developers and it lets your company play around, experiment, because it's all about experimentation. We're all smart, we all have good ideas, but not every time, right? In fact, personally, I think that less than 1 in 10 of my ideas are good. Really. And this goes back to the not being dogmatic. I don't actually care how you do this. If you're working directly with me, sure, I'm going to care quite a lot because I'm pretty opinionated. But if your organisation can fix this and get a tighter OODA loop, you're going to kill your competition. It's that simple. The only thing I'm going to be dogmatic about is that if you write automated tests, they're kind of like backups, right? And I'm sure that everybody has heard the truism for, well, how good are your backups are about as good as your last restore. Because if you haven't tested, you can restore your backups. Well, in the last week, you probably can't restore your backups. The same with automated testing. If you're not automatically running your test suite every time someone commits, then your entire test suite is broken, basically. Because, well, certainly if you play anything like me, it will take you less than a day to break all your tests unless they're running them with automated. They must be run on commit. If you have any form of automated testing, a code commit must make this run sooner or later, preferably sooner, because that again shortens the length. But yeah, do whatever's effective for your role. If you have no automated tests, and the only thing you take from this is like using no-op mode and writing your own what would happen on, and that's better than what you had, that makes me happy. Cool. So, I'll step up it. A lot of people have kind of already covered this. I would recommend that you at least write a compile test to your code. Just because this makes you think about splitting code into modules, and you have to declare this module depends upon this module, depends upon this module. And if you suddenly find that your monitoring module depends upon the Puppet Master module, you're kind of thinking, surely this should be the other way around. Like my Puppet Master might need monitoring. It can expose things like that, and it just makes things better. So I've got a couple of tips, really quick tips. If you're starting with RSpec Puppet, the things you absolutely need to know is use Puppet Lab's spec helper, otherwise you'll have bad times. Useful tip is to inject mocks. When you have your monitoring module suddenly depends on your cron module, and you don't necessarily want to test all together, well, you can just mock out other things in your site.pp. You can still, it's that interface point. So your monitoring module depends on your cron module, and you can still assert that I monitored this, and therefore it asked the cron module to create this cron job. You don't care past that. You don't care what method the cron module uses, therefore you shouldn't bother including the cron module. You can just fade it out. Because the interface is, well, given my complex dependency, I can check that my complex dependency was called with $foo and $bar. I don't care about any of the rest. I don't care and want to include any of the rest or any of their dependencies, really. So that's a really good trick. Obviously, you can abuse this and write terrible tests that are completely useless, but don't do that. Server spec is another thing. So this actually, RSpec Puppet compiles a catalog, doesn't actually apply it to a machine, lets you assert things about that. Server spec and also Vico, which I haven't mentioned but should mention, it will basically spin up a vagrant VM, actually applies your Puppet code to the vagrant VM, and then lets you assert things about what has actually changed, what the actual state of that actual machine is. So this is what I would call acceptance testing, and people who are wrong call integration testing. It's slower and kind of heavier weight than unit tests. I mean, obviously, because you need to start an entire vagrant VM, it's going to take a few minutes to run, at least a few minutes. If you write most of these things, they can take hours and hours and hours to run. So they're kind of best used sparingly, but they can be really valuable. For example, going back to the backups are only useful if you've got a restore, one of the largest things that we introduced that had value for testing in Yelp was just testing, can we bootstrap a new EC2 machine? Like, can we get a machine to run a few scripts and then run Puppet with a node manifest, but the only thing it does is install, like, the standard sysadmin uses. And just that stops me, like, about once a day from building new machines. Okay, maybe once every 2 days. Cool, so Jenkins has been mentioned. Jenkins is basically an incredibly complicated piece of Java that runs shell scripts. That's all it does, really. So you can just put all your tests together, and you can just tell Jenkins whenever someone commits to master, check master, run this rake test, and then shout at you when you break things. And this is my minimal level. I need something to run my tests and shout at me, because when I'm stressed because it's 3 o'clock in the morning and stuff broke, then I'm not going to bother to run the tests. And quite often, running the tests will kind of show, oh, you really shouldn't push that to production to fix the production issue, because it will delete all your web servers and have an even bigger production issue, right? So you can go further than this. I mean, absolutely, I think if you have any sort of automated testing, you should be running it automatically from Jenkins on commit to master. But if branches are really cheap, well, there's a whole load of things if branches are really cheap. You can make people, or you can encourage people to, if you're not 100% sure about this, just push a branch off and do some code review. Which can mean you just grab some of the water cooler and go, or grab some IRC and go, can you look at this branch that I just pushed and tell me if it's sane? Or you can have a more formal system than that. All the code review tools are terrible because they're made up of software. Software's terrible. But pick your poison, I don't really mind. Just pushing branches is good. And you can tell Jenkins, or go look at every branch. Run syntax checks. Tell me, how about I push a branch and put a code review up, and Jenkins says, guys, don't even bother looking at this guy's code review because it fails the tests. He's an idiot. Happens all the time. Happens all the time. Shouts at me in IRC, and usually I manage to fail the test 3 times and then get the test right before people wake up, because I'm in the UK and they're in San Francisco. It's good. You can go further than this. If you're crazy, or at least like me, Jenkins can merge branches for you. So you can kind of have a workflow that goes like this. and you can obviously you have this all reporting in IRC or email or Slack or whatever your preferred communication technology is, and you can go completely crazy with this. I mean, completely crazy. No, really. I haven't committed to master in at least 3 months, probably 4 or 5 at this point. Not a single change if I push to master. Jenkins is that for me. That's what he's there for, right? He closes the code reviews too, and the Jira tickets. It's just, like 3 manual things I don't have to do. It's great. Again, it took me an afternoon to write the Jenkins job to do that. It's not a big deal. Okay, so I'm almost finished, which is good because I've only got 2 minutes left. My kind of final note is that don't go too far. I mean, testing is awesome. I recommend you do it. Code review is awesome. I recommend you do it. But I kind of love this quote. Process must have code review. It's kind of less good, or at least it can be less good. You can trap yourself. You absolutely need to empower people to change the process. I mean, I'm all fine with process. In fact, I've been talking mostly about how you should codify your development process here. But don't do that unless everybody's empowered to make it better. You all have to be able to make it better or make suggestions. If you say, we're going to have mandatory code review and mandatory branches, without discussion, people are going to hate you, and people are going to go slower. Because maybe not everything needs a code review. If I want to bump an Elasticsearch cluster from 10 machines to 12 machines by adjusting 1 character in a hero YAML file, probably doesn't need a code review. And yeah, my kind of final point is that you shouldn't actually, I mean, you might put a formal policy in place to say you shouldn't do this, but you shouldn't need to. You shouldn't need to, because if you're doing it right, then using your tools of doing what the policy and process is will be easier than not doing, because you've automated it. You should be making doing the right thing a no-brainer for people, and that is pretty much what I mean by your Puppet workflow and investing in your Puppet workflow. You should be spending engineer time on making it a no-brainer to do the best and the right things. And that's it. Thanks. URL in the slides. I will upload the slides straight after this, so they'll all be online and all the links and stuff.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Tom. So if you have questions, you can ask those questions at the next break.
Sorry, we're gonna have
Sorry. There was so much good content there that we don't have questions on this time. Excellent. Well, another